Evan Thomas thought he knew everything about his wife, Claire. But when a mysterious envelope arrived in their mailbox, it exposed a truth so dark and well hidden, it shattered their marriage overnight, and revealed that Claire was never who she claimed to be. Evan Brooks never imagined his life would take such a dramatic turn. For years, everything had felt settled, predictable even. He worked as a project manager at a small construction firm in rural New Hampshire. His days followed a steady rhythm. Early mornings with black coffee and the local paper, a 20-minute drive to work, evenings on the porch with a cold beer, and dinners with his wife, Claire. Their home was modest but warm, tucked at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, surrounded by tall pine trees and distant mountain views. It was the kind of place people passed by without a second glance. A perfect hiding place, though Evan had no reason to think that mattered. Claire had always been a quiet soul. She wasn't one for gossip or social events, but she had a gentle kindness that made people trust her instantly. She volunteered twice a week at the town library and helped organize a small monthly book club. She baked muffins for the neighbors. During the holidays, sent handwritten thank you notes, and always made sure to smile at strangers. She had that easy warmth that disarmed suspicion. In 7 years of marriage, Evan never thought twice about her past. He knew she had grown up in the South, somewhere in Georgia or maybe Florida. She was never too specific about it, and that she didn't keep in touch with family. She once told him her parents had passed and that she had been raised mostly by an aunt. That had been enough for him. They met online through a dating site that catered to people looking for long-term relationships. Claire's profile had been simple. She liked quiet evenings, classic novels, and gardening. Her picture showed a woman in her early 30s with soft features, shoulder-length chestnut hair, and kind eyes. Evan messaged her first. Their connection had been quick, but not impulsive. They exchanged emails for weeks, then calls, and finally met in person. She had just moved to New Hampshire at the time and said she was ready for a fresh start. Evan, a lifelong local, welcomed her with open arms. Looking back, Evan realized how little he had questioned things. Claire didn't have many friends. She never talked about her childhood in detail. She didn't have any social media accounts, claiming she didn't like living online. But in a world where everyone seemed to overshare, Evan admired her privacy. He thought it made her different, grounded. Besides, there was never any real reason to suspect anything strange. Claire never behaved oddly. She was dependable, loving, and never raised her voice. She kept the house spotless, remembered birthdays, and supported Evan when his father passed away. They never argued about money, children, or anything else that tends to shake marriages. To the outside world, and even to Evan, their life seemed close to perfect. Over time, the years folded into each other. Holidays came and went. Weekend trips to the coast, anniversary dinners at their favorite Italian place in town, quiet mornings watching the snowfall through the kitchen window. It was the kind of life that didn't make headlines, but one people envied in its simplicity. Friends would occasionally ask Evan what the secret was to their happy marriage. He always answered the same way: trust and routine. That's what made what happened next so jarring. It began in the most ordinary way. One morning, Evan left the house around 7:30 a.m. and, like he always did, stopped by their mailbox on the way to his truck. Inside were the usual flyers and bills, but one envelope caught his eye. It was a plain white envelope with no return address, addressed to Claire, but not under the name Claire Brooks. Instead, it read, Melanie Carter. Evan paused, confused. At first he assumed it was a mistake. Maybe the mail carrier had delivered it to the wrong address, but the house number and street were correct. He flipped the envelope over. No return address. The handwriting was neat, almost too neat, like it had been written slowly and deliberately. He turned it over a few times, unsure of what to make of it. After a moment, he shrugged it off and brought the mail inside. He placed the envelope on the kitchen table along with the rest of the mail. Claire was in the shower, and Evan had to leave for work, so he didn't think much more of it. By the time he came home that evening, the letter was gone. Claire said nothing about it, and Evan didn't ask. Maybe it had just been a weird coincidence. Maybe it was an old name she'd used on a subscription or something. Still, the name stuck with him. Over the next few days, more strange mail arrived. Not every day, but enough to make it hard to ignore. 2 more envelopes came addressed to Melanie Carter. One was clearly from a law firm. Another was marked urgent in red letters. Evan mentioned it casually over dinner one night, but Claire brushed it off, saying it was probably junk mail from a mailing list she'd accidentally subscribed to. She didn't seem rattled, just mildly annoyed. But after that, she began checking the mailbox before Evan could get to it. Then, something changed. Claire began acting differently. Subtle things at first, forgetting to make coffee in the morning, which she never did, or spacing out during their usual evening TV shows. She started going for long walks without telling him, and her phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was always within reach, locked with a password he didn't recognize. Her cheerful mood began to fade. Evan noticed dark circles under her eyes. She said she hadn't been sleeping well, that she had a lot on her mind. Evan told himself it was probably nothing. Maybe she was going through something personal. He didn't want to pry. But the distance between them began to grow, one silent dinner at a time. One night, Evan came home later than usual and found Claire sitting on the porch in the dark. She had no jacket on, just a sweater, and stared out into the woods like she was expecting something to appear. He called her name, and she startled like she'd been caught doing something wrong. When he asked if she was okay, she smiled quickly and said she was fine, just thinking. That was the moment Evan realized he didn't recognize the look in her eyes. It was fear, tightly wrapped in calm. The next morning, another envelope arrived, larger this time. A manila envelope with no markings, no return address, just the name Melanie Carter printed across the front. Something about it felt different, more official, more serious. He stood in the driveway, holding it in both hands, unsure whether to open it or hand it over. And in that moment of hesitation, a quiet question began to echo in his mind. Who had he really married? He had no way of knowing then, but that single envelope would be the key that unlocked a hidden past, one so deeply buried that not even 7 years of marriage had been enough to reveal it. A life lived in shadows was about to come to light, and everything he thought he knew about his wife was about to unravel, piece by piece. Evan didn't know what finally pushed him to do it. Maybe it was the sleepless night that came before, or the tight knot of unease that had been growing in his chest. Maybe it was the way Claire had been avoiding eye contact lately, or how she disappeared into town without saying where she was going. But when the large manila envelope addressed to Melanie Carter arrived, something inside him snapped. He stood in the kitchen with the envelope in his hands, the room so still he could hear the refrigerator humming. The name stared back at him, like a challenge. Claire, or Melanie, or whoever she really was, wasn't home. She had gone to the grocery store hours ago and hadn't returned. The clock ticked past noon. Evan opened the envelope. What he found inside didn't make sense at first. A stack of documents, printed pages, and copies of official-looking forms. The first few were court documents, custody filings from a state court in Florida. They were dated over 10 years ago. One of them had the words "Emergency Petition" stamped in bold red ink across the top. The names listed were unfamiliar to Evan, except one, Melanie Carter. She was listed as the petitioner. Opposite her was someone named Nathan Bell, the respondent. The documents outlined a custody dispute over a female child, born in 2012. That child, Evan realized with rising confusion, would be around 12 or 13 now. He read on, skimming through paragraphs filled with legal language. One phrase jumped out at him. Temporary suspension of parental rights. According to the court papers, Melanie had been denied custody due to concerns of emotional instability and erratic behavior. There were accusations of non-compliance with court orders, and one particularly disturbing mention of alleged threats made against the child's father. Evan's hands began to shake. He turned to the next page. A police report, dated months after the court case. It detailed a missing person investigation. Melanie Carter had disappeared after a court hearing. Her car was found abandoned in a mall parking lot. Her cell phone had been turned off. There was no note, no sign of struggle. Authorities initially suspected foul play, but then rumors began to circulate that she had left intentionally. One detective suggested she may have fled the state to avoid arrest after violating a court order. She had vanished without a trace. Evan leaned against the counter, struggling to breathe. None of this made sense. Claire, his Claire, couldn't be the same woman. But the more he read, the harder it became to deny. A photocopy of a driver's license was buried near the bottom of the stack. It showed a younger version of Claire, hair slightly longer, but undeniably her. The name read, Melanie Carter. It had expired over 10 years ago. The final document hit the hardest. A restraining order filed by Nathan Bell against Melanie, citing multiple incidents of stalking and harassment. One entry detailed a late-night break-in attempt. Another noted several phone calls from blocked numbers. The restraining order was granted for 5 years. Evan felt a chill creep down his spine. He had never seen his wife lose her temper, never heard her raise her voice. But this was something else entirely. This was another life, a hidden one, and it was filled with chaos. Hours passed before Claire returned. Evan hid the documents before she came through the door, his mind racing. She acted like everything was normal, chatting about traffic and how the store was out of the good tomatoes. He nodded along, pretending to listen, all the while studying her face, watching for any cracks in the mask. For the first time in their marriage, he felt like he was living with a stranger. That night, Evan waited until Claire was asleep before pulling out the documents again. He laid them across the dining table, organizing them chronologically. The picture that emerged was a grim one. Melanie Carter had been involved in a bitter custody battle. She had lost, then disappeared. The police had searched for her, but no leads had emerged. And somehow, years later, she had turned up in New Hampshire with a new name, a new life, and no trace of the past. He opened his laptop and began searching. Public records, old news articles, archived case files. It didn't take long to find a local news story from 2014. The headline read, Mother vanishes after custody ruling. Police suspect voluntary disappearance. There was a small photo accompanying the piece, a younger, more tired version of Claire. The article recapped the custody case, briefly mentioned the father, Nathan Bell, and confirmed that the child had been placed in his care. Melanie's sudden disappearance had sparked rumors but no answers. Evan followed every thread he could find. A few Reddit posts from true crime forums discussed the case, speculating on where Melanie could have gone. Some believed she had changed her identity and escaped to another country. Others thought she was dead. No one mentioned New Hampshire. No one ever connected her to Claire Brooks. What troubled Evan more than anything was the silence. The life he had shared with Claire had never hinted at this kind of chaos. She had always been calm, steady. But now, Evan wondered if that calm was something learned, something practiced. Had she lived every day afraid of being discovered? And if she had lied about something so enormous, what else wasn't real? The next morning, Evan called in sick to work. He needed time to think. He walked the perimeter of their property again and again, mind circling the same questions. Had she been in touch with the child? Had she planned to leave again? And most of all, was she dangerous? Later that day, more mail arrived. A thin envelope with no return address, addressed to Melanie Carter. Evan didn't open it this time. Instead, he placed it on the table in front of Claire that evening and watched her reaction. Her eyes widened, just for a moment, and then she quickly slid it into her purse. She didn't say a word. The silence between them was heavier than it had ever been. That night, Evan checked the mailbox again, even though he knew it was empty. As he stood at the edge of their driveway, the wind rustling the trees, he realized that whatever happened next would change everything. The truth was out now, even if she hadn't admitted it, and deep down, he knew the calm of their quiet little life was already gone. There would be no going back. Certainly. Here's Chapter 3, expanded to approximately 1,200 words, continuing the story in the same suspenseful, immersive style without any headings or dialogue. Evan couldn't sleep. The weight of what he had uncovered sat like a stone on his chest. He lay in bed next to a woman whose past he had only just begun to understand, feeling more like a roommate to a stranger than a husband to someone he had loved for years. Claire slept soundly beside him, or at least pretended to. Her breathing was steady, but something about the rhythm felt too controlled, too perfect. Evan stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of how the woman he married had once been a missing person, a subject in a police report, and the focal point of a custody battle that ended in disappearance. The next morning, Claire acted like nothing had changed. She folded laundry in silence, moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, and smiled at Evan as though everything was fine. But her eyes told a different story. They avoided his. She didn't ask how he slept. She didn't mention the envelope he had left for her. And she didn't explain why the name Melanie Carter kept arriving in their mailbox. That omission said more than any confession ever could. Evan decided he needed answers beyond the paperwork. He spent the day making phone calls. He started with the law firm listed on one of the documents from the envelope. They refused to discuss the case, citing confidentiality. He tried the county courthouse listed on the court filings. A tired-sounding clerk confirmed the existence of the case number and verified that Melanie Carter had been declared a fugitive after skipping a court-ordered hearing. The child involved, a girl named Ava Bell, had been returned to her father, Nathan Bell, and the case had gone cold years ago. There had been no contact since. Until now. Driven by something between fear and curiosity, Evan went further. He searched for Nathan Bell. It wasn't difficult. A few articles mentioned that he now lived in Vermont, only a couple hours from where Evan and Claire had built their quiet life. One blog post described him as a single father and high school science teacher. Another listed his name among attendees at a recent education conference. Evan stared at the screen, wondering if Nathan knew Claire was still alive, wondering if he had sent the letters. The more Evan thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Someone had found her. Someone knew she was alive. And whoever sent the manila envelope didn't just want to warn her. They wanted her to run again. The days that followed, Claire became increasingly withdrawn. She stopped volunteering at the library. She turned off her phone for long stretches. Evan caught her staring out the window more than once, her eyes scanning the street, as if expecting someone to appear. She didn't say anything about it, and Evan didn't confront her. Not yet. He needed more information first. He wasn't ready to tip his hand. Late one night, after Claire had gone to bed, Evan went back to the court records. He wanted to know more about Ava, the child at the center of it all. He found a few old photos embedded in news stories. In one, a small toddler with dark hair and bright eyes smiled for the camera. Evan's chest tightened. He recognized the features, not from the photo, but from someone else. Claire had occasionally mentioned a niece who came to visit every summer. A quiet, shy girl who stayed with them for a week or two, usually during July. Evan hadn't thought much of it. The girl didn't speak much and seemed nervous around strangers. Claire had said the child's mother was her cousin, who traveled a lot for work. Now, Evan saw the resemblance clearly. The girl who had slept in their guest room, eaten breakfast at their table, and drawn pictures in the backyard was Ava. It had never been a niece. It had been her daughter. The realization hit Evan like a punch. Claire had brought the child into their home without saying a word about who she really was. And worse, Evan had unknowingly played a part in hiding her. He remembered one summer when Ava had arrived unexpectedly, with no luggage, and Claire had gone shopping to get her clothes. He remembered how she had told their neighbors the girl was just visiting, and how she always seemed anxious when anyone asked too many questions. Now, he understood why. Claire hadn't been babysitting a relative. She had been hiding her kidnapped daughter. The implications were staggering. Evan's mind raced with images of police cars, courtrooms, and headlines. If the truth came out, it wouldn't matter that he hadn't known. People would talk. His career could be ruined, his reputation in their small town destroyed. And above all, the girl would be taken again, this time by the law. Evan wasn't sure who was right anymore. Claire for taking her daughter back, or the courts for taking her away in the first place. But the fact remained, Claire had broken the law, and now she was being hunted. The next week passed in a fog. Evan watched Claire constantly. He noticed how she kept her bags packed, how she triple-checked the locks before going to bed, and how she left the television on during the day, always tuned to the news. She didn't ask him about the mail anymore, and he didn't bring it up. Their conversations shrank to routine exchanges. "What's for dinner? Did you call the plumber? I'll be home late." On the surface, things seemed fine, but beneath it all, they were both waiting for something to happen. Then, one afternoon, Claire was gone. Evan returned home from work and found the house dark. No dinner waiting, no note on the counter. Her phone was missing. Her suitcase from the closet was gone. Her toothbrush, her jacket, even her passport. Everything had vanished. Evan stood in the living room, heart pounding, as he slowly realized she had run. He checked the security camera they kept on the front porch. The footage showed Claire leaving the house just after noon, pulling a rolling suitcase behind her. She didn't look back. She got into a gray sedan Evan didn't recognize and drove off. Evan called the police. Not to report her missing, but to tell them everything. He turned over the documents, the court files, the printed emails. He explained what he had learned, when he had learned it, and what he suspected. Investigators took it seriously. Within days, the FBI became involved. Claire, or Melanie, was officially a fugitive once again. And now, she had taken her daughter with her. Evan's quiet life, once filled with routines and small joys, had collapsed into a national manhunt. His phone rang constantly. Reporters, detectives, federal agents. His name appeared in articles, always with the same shocked quote. He had no idea who his wife really was. The town whispered behind closed doors. People who once waved at him now crossed the street. Trust, once easily given, had been shattered. But for Evan, the biggest question remained unanswered. Where had she gone? And how long had she been planning it? The truth had come out, but it wasn't over. Somewhere out there, the woman he married was on the run again, the daughter she'd never stopped fighting for by her side. And Evan was left behind, staring at the pieces of a life that had never really been his. The days following Claire's disappearance moved slowly, each hour weighed down with uncertainty. Evan stayed in the house they had once shared, though it no longer felt like home. The silence was oppressive, interrupted only by the occasional phone call from law enforcement or journalists eager to extract new information. The story had spread quickly. Local news stations picked it up first, then national outlets. The headline became familiar across social media. Wife's hidden identity, exposed after mysterious mail delivery leads to shocking truth. Evan watched the coverage in disbelief. Strangers speculated about Claire's past, about his involvement, about whether he had helped her run. There were photos of the two of them smiling at a neighborhood barbecue, taken long before the truth unraveled. Now, those smiles looked false, as if even then some part of them had sensed what was coming. Evan had given his statement to the authorities. He had been honest, told them when he found the documents, how he traced her past, how he realized who Ava really was. They seemed satisfied with his answers, but he knew he was being watched. His phone was likely tapped, his internet history combed through, and although he hadn't broken any laws, he was entangled in something much bigger than he could control. Every night, Evan lay awake, replaying the months leading up to Claire's vanishing. He remembered the way she started locking drawers that had once been open, how she had grown quiet when mail arrived, how she avoided using their shared computer. At the time, he chalked it up to stress or personal boundaries. Now, he saw it. Clearly, she had been preparing to leave. And not just for a few days. She had planned this carefully, waiting for the right moment, the right excuse, the right vehicle. The authorities had few leads. The gray sedan Claire left in had been rented under a false name with a prepaid credit card. The car was found abandoned in upstate New York 3 days later, wiped clean. Surveillance footage showed Claire and Ava entering a gas station nearby, both wearing hats and sunglasses, looking like a mother and daughter on vacation. That was the last confirmed sighting. After that, the trail went cold. Investigators believed Claire had crossed the border, either into Canada or farther south through a network of aliases. They speculated she might have received help from someone who specialized in false documents, someone who had done this before. It wasn't her first disappearance, after all. Evan searched for signs on his own. He combed through their shared emails, their credit card records, their cloud storage. He found nothing. Claire had erased nearly every trace of herself. Old photos were deleted from their shared albums. Phone backups had been disabled. Files from her personal laptop were wiped or encrypted. She had left behind no clues, no goodbyes, nothing to explain her reasons. But Evan didn't need an explanation. She had taken her daughter. That said enough. What haunted him most was Ava, the quiet, withdrawn girl who had colored in the kitchen while Claire made dinner, the girl who never asked questions and never seemed fully at ease. Evan remembered the one summer Ava had cried after Claire told her it was time to go. He thought it was because she didn't want to leave their home. Now he wondered if Ava had sensed something deeper, fear, tension, maybe even confusion about who she was allowed to love and trust. What did Claire tell her? Did Ava know who she really was? Did she know her father had full custody? Did she remember being taken? Evan couldn't stop picturing her in the back seat of that car, looking out the window, unaware that she had just become the center of a nationwide manhunt. He received a visit from the FBI 2 weeks after Claire vanished. The agents asked more questions, many of them repeats. They wanted to know about Claire's friends, her habits, her childhood stories. Evan answered everything honestly, but each question made him realize how little he had known about her. She never spoke of her family. She never mentioned past relationships. She told stories, yes, but they were always vague. When he asked where she grew up, she gave a different town each time. When he pressed for more, she brushed it off with a laugh or changed the subject. Evan had assumed she was private. He had never imagined she was hiding an entire identity. After the agents left, Evan walked the house, room by room, searching for anything she might have missed. He found nothing. Every trace of her planning had been removed. But in the guest room, tucked inside a drawer of old books, he found a single photo. It was bent at the edges and slightly faded. Claire and Ava stood together in front of a lake, arms wrapped around each other. Claire's face was tired, but peaceful. Ava was, smiling, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. On the back of the photo, written in pen, were the words, "Somewhere they can't find us." Evan stared at those words for a long time. The photo wasn't dated, but he guessed it had been taken the previous summer. He remembered Claire saying they needed a weekend away, just the two of them. She said she wanted to bond with her niece. Now he realized it had been a test run, a practice escape, a glimpse of the life she was desperate to return to. In the weeks that followed, tips came in from all over the country. Sightings in small towns, highway rest stops, national parks. None of them led anywhere. Claire had vanished before. She knew how to hide. And this time, she had more reason than ever to stay hidden. Evan's own life remained in limbo. He took a leave of absence from work, unable to focus. Friends drifted away. Some offered sympathy. Others looked at him like he was part of the crime. His phone rang less often now, but every time it did, his heart jumped. Part of him hoped it would be her. Part of him feared it. One night, just after midnight, he received an email from a private, untraceable address. There was no message. No name. Only an attachment. He hesitated before opening it. When he did, his breath caught. It was a photo, taken recently, Claire and Ava, standing on a forest trail. Ava was older now, her hair longer, her face more serious. Claire looked different too, thinner, her hair dyed darker. But her eyes were the same. Behind them, trees stretched into a thick wilderness. No landmarks. No clues. Beneath the photo, a single sentence was typed in plain black font. "She's safe. Please stop." Evan stared at the screen for hours. He didn't reply. He knew he couldn't. The address had already gone dark. He printed the photo and hid it in his desk drawer. Despite everything, part of him felt relief. Ava was alive. Claire hadn't hurt her, at least not physically. But the cost of that safety was enormous, and it wasn't over. The law would keep searching, the press would keep asking questions, and Evan would keep living with the reality that the woman he loved had never truly existed. She had been an illusion, carefully constructed, expertly performed. Now, the truth had taken her away. And still, somewhere deep down, Evan couldn't stop wondering what would happen if she ever came back. Winter came early that year. Snow dusted the town in October, blanketing the streets in a quiet stillness that mirrored the emptiness Evan felt inside. The holiday lights began appearing on rooftops and fences, glowing warmly against the dark skies. But they felt out of place. Cheerful reminders in a season that no longer held meaning for him. His house remained undecorated. The rooms felt colder, the space around him quieter, and every ornament he unpacked only reminded him of someone who was never really there. He spent his days going through motions. Grocery trips, walks through the neighborhood, answering the occasional call from a law enforcement agent who still believed Claire could be found. Some asked if he'd heard from her again. Others probed for insight into how she might think, where she might go, who she might trust. Evan always gave them the same response: no contact, no clues, no answers. But in the privacy of his home, he replayed that one message over and over. The photo of Claire and Ava, the forest backdrop, the line, "She's safe. Please stop." He had not stopped. Not really. Not entirely. Though he told himself it was to bring closure, to understand. The truth was simpler. He couldn't let go. Not of Claire. Not of Ava. And not of the version of his life that had unraveled so completely in the span of weeks. The FBI's case was still open, but quiet. The media had moved on to newer scandals, fresher headlines. The public's attention had drifted, and the pressure had lessened. But Evan felt no relief. Silence was worse in many ways. It meant Claire had vanished completely. It meant she might never resurface. Still, the case remained. Her face was listed on national databases, now under two names: Claire Thompson and Melanie Carter. Ava's photo, altered to reflect her aging appearance, was circulated among agencies. There was no statute of limitations for kidnapping. Claire was a fugitive, and Ava was still legally a missing child. One evening in early December, Evan received another envelope. This time, there was no return address. It looked similar to the first, but smaller, thinner. He opened it cautiously. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No photo, no explanation. Just a list of 5 words typed in a serif font. "If you love her, wait." No signature, no name, no instructions. Just the message, short and deliberate. Evan read it several times. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a plea. It was something else entirely. An invitation, perhaps, or a test. The kind Claire would send. He didn't know what it meant, not exactly, but the timing unnerved him. It had been 3 months since her disappearance. 3 months since that final glimpse of Ava. And now this. He didn't contact the police. He kept the message to himself. Instead, he began looking deeper into the one person who hadn't made contact through any official channels. Nathan Bell, Ava's biological father. The man who had fought for custody. The man who had lost his daughter not once, but twice. Evan had never spoken to him, never heard his voice, never seen his face beyond the articles. But now he needed to understand the other side of the story. Through public records, Evan tracked down a current address for Nathan in Vermont. He debated whether to reach out. What would he say? That his missing wife had once stolen the man's child and vanished for years. That she had married someone else under a new name and built an entire life on lies. That she was gone again, possibly forever. Evan wrote a letter but didn't send it. Then he wrote another, shorter one. Finally, one morning, he got in the car and drove north. It was a quiet drive, the roads lined with frost and bare trees. He arrived just outside Burlington and found the address, a modest home on a wooded lot, snow covering the roof. There was a swing set in the yard. A dog barked from inside. Evan sat in the car, hands on the steering wheel, unsure of what he was doing. He didn't knock. He didn't even get out. He just watched the house for a while. A man in his 40s came out to collect the mail, bundled in a thick jacket, his breath visible in the cold air. He looked ordinary, tired, alone. Evan left without being seen. That night, Evan realized something that had been building quietly beneath the surface. He no longer felt angry. Not at Claire, not even at the deception. There was confusion of course, grief. But the sharpness of betrayal had dulled. In its place was something more complicated. He missed her. Not just the woman she pretended to be, but the person she might have been behind it all. The woman who had read to Ava in the evenings, who had planted flowers along the fence, who had smiled at him in the morning like they had the world figured out. But now he knew that smile had always hidden something, and she had known, from the very beginning, that it would never last. Weeks passed. Christmas came and went. Evan spent it alone, watching old movies and letting the world continue around him. Occasionally, he checked forums online, pages dedicated to missing persons and unsolved mysteries. Some threads speculated about Claire's whereabouts. Some believed she had changed her identity again and disappeared into another life. Others insisted she'd never be found. Evan read every comment, every theory, without reacting. He wasn't looking for answers anymore. He was looking for understanding. Then, one morning in January, a small package arrived. No return address, again. Inside was a flash drive. He plugged it into his laptop, heart pounding. There was only one file, a video, 30 seconds long. It opened with the sound of wind. Then the camera settled on a scene. Ava, older now, sitting beside a campfire. She looked directly at the camera, then smiled. Claire sat next to her, hair shorter, wearing a thick jacket. She didn't speak. She just reached out and brushed Ava's hair back. Then the screen went black. It wasn't a message. It wasn't a threat. It was a moment. Evan closed the laptop and sat in the quiet for a long time. He didn't call anyone. He didn't try to trace the sender. He simply watched the video again. For the first time in months, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself. Peace. Because in that brief glimpse, he saw what Claire had always wanted. Not to run, not to deceive, but to protect. And however twisted her choices had been, however illegal or painful, she had never stopped trying to keep Ava safe. The story was far from over. The law would continue searching. Others would keep asking questions. But for Evan, the chapter had closed. She was gone. The woman he married had vanished, taking the truth with her. But in her absence, she had left behind something stronger than suspicion or grief. She had left behind a message. If you love her, wait. And in his heart, Evan understood. He would wait, not in hope of reunion, not for forgiveness, but because some part of him still believed in the woman she had tried to become, and the life they might have had if only the past had let go. And so he waited, silently, alone, but no longer lost.